tuned in to Just Blog. Today we are here at Cape Coast Castle and we will be learning the history of the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. So come on, let's take a walk inside and find out exactly what took place so long ago. Thank you so much. So today we are going to be doing a tour of Cape Coast Castle, and we are here with a tour guide who is going to be leading the way and showing us around and telling the details of exactly what took place here inside of this massive building.
So my name is Chester Sakwa. I'm a Museums Education Officer with Ghana Museums and Monument Board. So this is Cape Coast Castle. This is the third European structure the Europeans constructed along the coast of Ghana. And this was built by England around 1665. We have two other castles, one by the name Elmina Castle, that is the oldest, 1482. That one is about 200 years older than Cape Coast Castle. And we have the other one in Accra, Christiansborg Castle, Denmark, 1661. And we have several forts. And the interesting thing is, along the coast of West Africa, we had about 60 European castles and forts. And out of that, Ghana had more than 50. So Ghana had about 90% of all the forts and castles in West Africa. So you wonder why Ghana had that much. We had that much because of gold. Gold attracted the Europeans here. So the Europeans did not come here to spread the gospel.
Right.
Or they didn't come here.
But they portrayed to, though, right? They came here with the motive that because they came with Bibles, didn't they?
Exactly.
Bibles.
Yes. The main motive was gold, because geographically, North Africa is closer to Europe than West Africa.
Okay.
And most of the gold was coming from West Africa, across the Sahara to North Africa. So the Europeans wanted to break that monopoly. So they traveled from Lisbon, Portugal, all the way to Elmina around 1471 in search of gold. They had it. 1482, they constructed Elmina Castle. They called our coast the Gold Coast. They called that structure La Mina, the gold mine. So Ghana's coast was flooded with various European forts and castles as a result of the abundance of gold the Europeans had here. But at some point in time, the demand for gold in Europe shifted to the demand for sugar, cotton, coffee, tobacco. And as we all know, Europe is a temperate region. Europe could not cultivate those crops. So now the New World was explored by the Europeans. We had the plantation farms era, where labor was demanded on those plantation farms. Unfortunately, this part of the world was chosen. Talking about Cape Coast Castle, the British only constructed it for the transatlantic slave trade, not the gold trade.
The Europeans, why do you think it is that they chose to come here to take people and send them abroad?
Okay, initially, as I mentioned, they came here because of gold. So they had already constructed their fort and castles.
Here, okay.
And you realize that the same Portuguese or the same Europeans invented the transatlantic slave trade around the mid-15th century. So they now converted their storerooms for gold into dungeons. So now there was no need for them to go elsewhere and construct other forts.
They were already set up here.
Exactly. So Cape Coast Castle was one of the main transit points for English activities in West Africa in accordance to the gold trade and the slave trade. So we have the male dungeons, the female dungeons, the door of no return, which served as a final exit for all the captives. And also we have a condemned cell where people were suffocated to death. Those who resisted, brave, those who fought back, were killed at the beginning themselves. So we have a lot to see and a lot to hear. And apart from that also, after the gold and the slave trade, the Europeans did not vacate this country. They stayed and colonized. So in Ghana, colonization started 6th March 1844. It didn't start with the entire country. It started with the Fantis. So 1844, when it started, officially, Cape Coast Castle now served as the seat of government for the British. And again, Cape Coast served as Ghana's first capital city. On 19th March 1877, the British removed the capital from Cape Coast to Accra. So that is another duty this building performed over the years. We'll begin the tour from the male slave dungeon.
So now we are going to see where the male slaves were held. we are inside of the entryway to the male slave dungeon. It feels a little cool coming up. I don't know if it's the breeze off the ocean, but let's go explore and see what's happening. So, was this door here?
Yes, there was a door. Yes, there was.
But it was closed. So
yeah, it was closed immediately
after the slaves entered.
Yes, entered. Yes.
So then it's complete darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, now the door was locked, so the light ceased.
So the only light would have been the light coming from this little window right here. I can't imagine. Can't imagine.
All right, so the male dungeons. The male dungeons consist of 5 chambers. So the first chamber is right there. They kept about 100 to 200 men in every chamber.
1 to 200.
Yeah, so a maximum of about 200 men were here. Overall, the male dungeons contained about 1,000 people. And they could stay in these dungeons for about 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months before the ships arrived.
Wow.
They had to go to toilet, they had to urinate, they had to sleep, they had to eat. They had to do everything in these dungeons till the time the ships arrived. So when you look carefully on the floor, you find gutters.
Yes.
These gutters were here for toilet and urine to go through. But ask yourself this question: how many times can toilet and urine run through these gutters if about 200 men were here and if such conditions existed here for more than 100 years? It got to some point, the whole place was filled up with their toilet, urine, vomit, blood, sand, saliva. So the whole place got filled up to about this height.
Oh my gosh. So they were standing in
Exactly. The Europeans never cleaned up the place, even after the slave trade was abolished or when they were here. So the whole place got filled up with the things they left. 1973, we excavated this place. So after the excavation, we found the original floor and the gutters. Let me draw your attention to this. So when we were excavating, we didn't excavate the whole thing. We left this portion for you. So this portion here contains their toilet, urine, vomit, blood, saliva, tears, everything they left. We have it right here. Also note, we've had nothing like excavation for the rest of the rooms. So when we move out, we'll walk on top of everything they left in those dungeons.
So is there something poured over the top of what was left behind?
So what was left behind is this.
Oh, that's it.
That's it. So underneath it is the original.
Oh, okay.
So the whole place was just like this.
Wow.
So when we excavated, we only left you this portion. That was only where they had mines and buried the dungeons. It is estimated that about 1/3 of them did not survive the conditions in here. And when they died, their bodies were removed, their bodies were thrown into the sea. Once or twice a day, they were given food and water, but the food was nothing good to write home about, something to sustain them for a while till the time the ships arrived. And also, you realize that language was a barrier among them. They couldn't speak among themselves because they were brought from different ethnic groups within the sub-region. Because as far as from Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, they brought people here. We can say that West Africa was a transit point during the transatlantic slave trade, but Ghana moved a lot of Africans than any other West African country. So we can say that Ghana was the main transit point during the transatlantic slave trade. And the people who went through Ghana were not necessarily Ghanaians, but they were brought from other regions within West Africa.
And so they didn't have cars, so I would imagine they were walking through woods.
Yes, they walked, and they didn't even walk on roads, footpath. So you can imagine those who died on the way, those who got drowned in rivers, those who were attacked.
And so were they chained as they were going?
Yes.
So they were chained together, so one couldn't swim, they all drowned.
Exactly, yeah. So to restrict their movement, to prevent any rebellion or, to keep them in check. Mm-hmm. That's how come they chained them. And even in the dungeons, yeah, they were chained
together,
and shackled. Yeah,
even in
together.
here.
Yeah.
With nowhere to go, they were still chained.
Chained, yes. So I'll take you through the other rooms also.
So this was a little bit hard to ingest. Just seeing exactly where the feces and the blood and the urine that was left behind from our ancestors is something that I did not expect to see. So, guys, this is a hard one.
I'll also talk to you about something very intriguing here. So, first of all, take a good look at the floor. So, what we are standing on now is everything they left: toilet, urine, vomit, blood, urine, saliva, tears. At the middle, you find the gutter. So, again, in the midst of people, toilet and urine passed out into the sea. Now, upon all the conditions the enslaved Africans had to endure in these dungeons, right above it was the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. So it happened that God was worshipped, Jesus was worshipped, and right underneath it, people died, people screamed, people were brutalized. Same chamber, you find an observation post or a spy hole. Some of the soldiers would stand there and watch.
Watch the people here.
Here, yes. And interestingly, the entrance of that spy hole is closer to the entrance of the church. So whoever passed by to worship God
Heard the screaming.
could smell, could see what was going on here. And those in the dungeons also heard what was going on upstairs. I'll show you the last one. So this is the last chamber within the male dungeons.
Mm-hmm.
You realize that this chamber is brighter, right? It's brighter than the other rooms.
Mm-hmm.
If I should even turn off the light, this room will remain bright. The thing is, when the ships arrived, they didn't move all of them into the ships. They sorted them out, got those who were fit and strong enough to survive the journey, and those who were sick and incapable of surviving the middle passage stayed behind in the dungeons till the last person died. Then their bodies were thrown into the sea. Those who were fit or strong enough to survive the journey were chained, shackled, or roped. Gradually, the dungeon was emptied.
Mm-hmm.
They were taken from here to the door of no return. But when they were leaving the dungeons, they didn't go out that way again. So behind you, you find this wall. See this very wall? Right behind the wall, the British built a tunnel or a passage. So what I'm trying to say is, at some point in time, that end was opened up.
Mm-hmm.
So in chains and in shackles, all the men were taken through the tunnel to the door of no return. Unfortunately, we can't go through the tunnel. It's closed.
Who closed it? The British?
Yeah, the British closed it. They passed a law in their parliament banning the transportation of Africans from the British territories within Africa to America, Jamaica, and all that. So they passed a law ending the transportation of Africans from here as slaves. So that did not end slavery entirely, because in the West Indies and the Caribbean, South America, people were still held as slaves till 1834, when former slaves within the English territories were emancipated, till 1865. After the Civil War, when it ended in the United States, 1888, it ended in Brazil. So Brazil was the last place the transatlantic slave trade ended. So the slave trade continued for more than 400 years. So Africans had to endure such brutalities for more than 400 years. So though we cannot go through the tunnel, when we go up again, I'm going to show you some part of the tunnel, the exit.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had these ones on behalf of people who visit Cape Coast Castle, some of them on behalf of diplomats. We had these to remember those who died during the transatlantic slave trade. I say it was on behalf of those who were victims of the Black Holocaust. Yes. And I also want to draw your attention to the altar. Currently, this room is a sacred ground. It's a place of worship for the local people. And in this context, I'm actually talking about the type of spirituality we practice as Africans before Christianity and Islam was introduced to us. We had the knowledge and belief that God created us as human beings, and God created all the elements around us. God created the stars, the moon, other natural things. And it was in our belief that we could communicate through this element to God.
Okay.
So before the Europeans settled on this land was a sacred ground for the local people. They communicated to God through the earth.
So they used to worship here.
Exactly.
Where there was a castle.
Yes. About 80% of this area is a rock. So the rock was seen as an oracle or a deity. Okay. The name was Nana Tabir. So the local people communicated to God here. But when the Europeans arrived, the people of Cape Coast had to relocate. So they vacated this area for the Europeans. So 1973, again, this altar was erected. The sacred stones were returned. So till date, whatever needs to be done here in accordance with the African spirituality, it's done. So that is the importance of the altar now. The gentleman sitting there is a traditional priest, the gatekeeper of the shrine.
So he prays with the people as they come.
Exactly.
Okay.
So he would perform libation for us to see how it's done here.
Walk from Payfo, Quesayo, Secona, and away. Would ha? Would you admit that it was a castle and that time I man? It must be just we're going to be that time I man. Maybe so now I shall. If you not the Edmond Kodu, and I know such best one Kodu. Papa one, Bon Ben. I'll be at the free bed. Because I did for a you could be fast to be the one fish.
Alright, so the priest prayed. He spoke Fanti. That is a language here. And he said he thanks the Almighty God for bringing all of you here safely. Whatever you're doing here should be successful. You are not strangers to the soil. You are relatives. But unfortunately, you were forced out here. You are back home. He welcomes you. And may he protect you. Whatever you're doing here should be successful. On your way back, may he also protect you. May he bless whatever you're doing there. So that is a prayer the priest performed right for you. Alright, so we'll have a look at the other side. We have a look at the other part of the castle. So from here, we're going to visit the female dungeons. I'm going to take you through the door of no return, but surely shall I return.
So what you have just seen is just so powerful. It's a powerful experience. Like, I just don't even have words at this moment. But listen, y'all just gotta come see for yourself. That's all I can say. Still trying to find myself, y'all. I didn't expect that, so I'm still trying to gather my emotions, but we're moving right along. Where are we now?
So we are right on top of the tunnel. You remember in the male dungeons, I mentioned a tunnel where the men were taken through to the door of no return. We are right on top of it. So when we go down that way again, I'm going to show you some part of the tunnel and the exit. Not forgetting the guns. See these guns, cannonballs. The British brought them. No, when the Europeans came, they were actually fighting among themselves to have a piece of Africa. They fought among themselves to have access to good trading posts. So now they will use their guns against their fellow Europeans, the Dutch, the French, anyone who tried to take their bread from them. So that was the essence of the guns. So we have them all over the place. So when you look at the history of this land changed hands about 5 times among the Europeans. They went through bloody wars. First, this place was occupied by Portugal. It changed hands to Sweden. Denmark fought Sweden. Holland fought Denmark. England fought Holland in that order. So that was the essence of the gun. So And one more thing I also want to draw attention to, the water here is very shallow. And as a result, the slave ships cannot come closer.
Okay.
Because when they come closer, the ships will sink.
Right.
Or the ships will come crashing through the rocks. So the ships docked some distance away from here. They placed them on boats, similar to those ones. And gradually, they took them to the ships. Yes.
So the ships were they a few different ships or was it one ship?
So fleet of ships.
Okay, so it's a bunch of them. And so they just waited in the
Yes.
horizon to load the slaves on.
Exactly.
So about how many slaves fit in one boat?
Okay, so for example, the British created ships that were supposed to carry 600 captives. But some of the ship owners abused them and kept about 800 of them on the ship.
Wow.
So the estimation was by the time they got to North America, the Caribbean, to the West Indies from here, about a half of them had died.
Because there were so many. It's overcrowded.
Yes, it was overcrowded, and the conditions on the ships was worse than the conditions in the dungeons. Yes. So with the transatlantic slave trade, it was always one worse than to the other. The conditions in the dungeons was worse. It was much worse on the ships. It was more worse on the plantation farms.
So it just got gradually worse and worse.
Yes.
And I would imagine that they would think that their pain would be over eventually, that if they could just survive, the dungeon, that things would get better, but it never did.
Yes.
And it only got worse.
So you remember in the mill dungeons, I spoke to you about the tunnel where all the men were taken through. So we are looking at the tunnel right now. So this is a spy hole to the tunnel. They built it in a way that nobody could climb up or nobody could descend. Some of the soldiers would just stand here and watch. In chains and in shackles, the men had to walk through the tunnel from the mill dungeon towards the door of the road. Sit. To go inside, I'm going to show you the exit of the tunnel. Please watch your step. The step down. So my sister, this side was the exit of the tunnel.
Oh, so this continued on. There was no wall here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, they got here, they were taken out that way again.
Okay.
So they took them to the shore, and at the shore they placed them on boat. Gradually they joined the bigger ships. The British closed that side.
Okay.
During the high tide and when the sea was rough, some of the water entered. So they closed it to avoid any damage to this part of the building. So from the tunnel, the men were taken out that way again, right towards the door of no return. This small room here used to be a cell or punishment room for women who resisted rape. Women thought to be aggressive, very hard to handle. We kept them there naked without food and water at times. And if they had to give them food and water, then they passed it to them through the small hole. See, there's a hole over there. Yes, they passed food to them through that hole.
The door here.
There was a door, yes.
Completely sealed door. Did the door have like holes for them to be able to see out?
It's a tiny hole, so that some air could penetrate in there. Because with this cell, it was not the aim that
They wanted them to die.
To die.
Just to suffer.
Yes, but we'll have a look at the other one, the condemned cell. So the condemned cell was a death chamber where people were suffocated to death. So this is part of the physical torture. They try to put some fear in you, not to resist, or they try to deter the others from trying to escape or rebel. And the conditions in the dungeons was the mental torture. You were broken. You were more like preparing you for the task ahead of you. So the Europeans devised the mental and the physical torture. Unfortunately, yes, to break them down. And that also prolonged the transatlantic slave trade.
So yeah, this is a lot to swallow. Very emotional experience for me in this moment. But we are now moving into the female dungeon, so we're going to take a look at how the women were kept when they were here.
Chamber 2. And each of these rooms contained a maximum of about 200 women housed. So let me show you this chamber. Watch your step.
So is it the same? Does the same apply as in the other where you kept like the feces and, because I would imagine the same
Yeah,
applies
same.
here too.
The same applies here because we've not excavated this room. Yes, so that's how come we can't even see any gutter. So perhaps there might be a gutter buried underneath what we are standing on now.
So did you put anything to preserve it over it?
No.
Oh, so this is literally
whatever
what
it
was
is.
here.
Exactly. Because the thing is, if we do anything to this, it's more like we are distorting history or we are changing the narrative.
Right.
And we don't want that to happen since this is a museum.
Okay.
So we left the dungeons as it is.
So we are literally, like, I'm trying to process this in my brain, but we are literally standing on the ground of feces and urine and blood and sweat and tears of our ancestors.
And also 200 women were here. Think about the heat. Think about the women when they had their menstrual period without getting any clean or proper wash. Think about those who got infected with diseases, died out of that. And also think about those who were sexually assaulted
And
or raped in these times.
in front of other women, or did they take them
They
out?
took them out, raped them, and brought them back into the dungeons. Okay. So women were victims of rape in the dungeons, ships, and on the plantation farms. The holes you see behind you, the tiny holes you see behind you, was the only source of light and air in the dungeons. You realize that underneath the hole there's a mark. So depending on the direction of the wind, when it rains, water enters. So when it rains heavily and you come into the female dungeons, you find rainwater here.
We are here at the door of no return, and we are going to open these doors to see the fate of what our ancestors had to endure when they were led away from here, their homeland, never again to return, and to be stripped away from their culture, their heritage, and everything that they knew.
Alright, so through the door of no return, all the captives were taken down to the shore and they were placed on boats. Gradually they joined the bigger ships from here. There's a good reason behind the door of return. We had it in '98. We had a festival by name Emancipation Day. And when we had Emancipation Day in '98, brothers and sisters at the Diaspora, so many of them returned home. Those from America, Jamaica, Brazil, Europe. Yes, we had a nice and a befitting ceremony here. And when they were coming, some families returned 2 human remains of their relatives who were former slaves.
Wow.
So one of the remains was removed from Kingston, Jamaica. Her name was Madam Crystal. The other was taken from New York, USA, by name Samuel Carson. So the remains were returned to Cape Coast Castle. We had a traditional funeral ceremony for them, and afterwards the 2 remains were buried 60 kilometers away from here at a town we call Asen Manso. So Asen Manso was one of the biggest slave markets in Ghana during the slave trade. There's a river called the Slave River. That was where the captives took their last bath before they were brought to the coast. So now every year, every August, we celebrate Emancipation Day. And not only that, we also celebrate Pan-African Struggle Festival, Panafest. We also celebrate Year of Return, Beyond Return. The aim is for us home as Africans to reconnect with our brothers and sisters at the diaspora. So I don't see you as a tourist. I see you as the ancestor because you carry the DNA of our ancestors. You are home on a pilgrimage to the motherland. You are here to reclaim what was stolen from you. I welcome you home, my sister. Thank you. Door of return. Yes. Right, so it's symbolic. You've returned.
I have returned.
Yes.
I am home. I am home. Yes. As you can see, they have turned the door of no return into the door of return, welcoming not just me, because I'm already here, I'm already here, but welcoming each and every person who is of this heritage to come back home and find your culture, re-identify with yourself, and return. We have just arrived at the cell. So what's this?
Yeah, so this is a condemned cell. The condemned cell was a death chamber for the freedom fighters, I call them, those who resisted, those who fought back. So one thing I want us to realize is this: Africans did not accept this condition. Nobody volunteered to be a slave here. They were stolen from their various homes and kept in these dungeons to be transported. So they didn't accept the situation. So some of them, or many, rebelled and revolted. So to the English, those ones were seen as troublemakers, or they felt that they will motivate the others also to rebel. So those who were caught rebelling, revolting, they were suffocated to death in the cell. They were denied of food, water, light, and air. So if you don't suffocate to death, you die out of hunger or thirst. So they built the cell to them as a deterrent to the others. And the unfortunate thing is, if about 10 or 20 people were kept in the cell, the last person had to die before the bodies were removed. Now they will show the bodies to the rest of the captives, and from there they will throw the bodies into the sea.
And how many people were kept in here?
Okay, so the number of people would depend on those who tried to escape or rebel at a time.
How many could it hold?
Okay, the cell could hold over 50 people
Okay.
at a time, over 50. So I'll take you through the cell. The doors are quite low, so I will urge you to watch your head.
Well, I'm short anyway, so. Oh, it's so dark in here. Like, deathly dark. Listen, I am claustrophobic and I cannot be in a closed space confined like this. So just coming in here alone, if I was alive in that time, I would have just died right on the scene, because this is crazy, y'all. It's a crazy experience.
So they leave them here in chains and in shackles. No food, no water, no air, no light. So you can imagine the pain, the agony before you died. You knew you were dying, but there was nothing you could do.
Yeah.
We can only say may their souls rest in peace. Ashe.
Our tour guide is going to tell us all about what happened here.
Yeah. All right, so the Palava Hall served as a slave market.
Slave market.
All right, so let's go in, I'll tell you more. So the Palava Hall served as a slave market within this castle. So here the British merchant waited on their agent to supply them with slaves. So I also take this opportunity and narrate to you how the whole thing started.
Okay.
You know, before the Europeans came, we lived side by side each other. But the thing is, when you compare the frequencies of tribal war before and after the coming of the Europeans, you realize that after the coming of the Europeans, tribal wars and ethnic warfare intensified among the Africans, because now Africans were enticed to supply the Europeans with slaves. And most of the times, the Europeans also created divisions among the Africans. Because the thing is, the more Africans fought among themselves,
Divide and conquer.
Divide and conquer, the more they benefited. So tribal wars, ethnic warfare, kidnappings, raids intensified.
Within the village, within the community of
Within
the Africans?
the communities, within the villages, within the towns.
Okay.
Yes. And also we can say that perhaps the Africans did not understand the true meaning of the European transatlantic slave trade.
Right.
Perhaps they had the notion that what the Europeans were practicing was similar to what they practice here. Because before the Europeans came, we practiced the domestic servitude or the indentured servitude, which is far different from the transatlantic slave trade.
So in a sense, they enslaved too, but just not to the extent that the Europeans went.
Exactly, because like with what we practiced here, if I had a slave, he or she maintained some liberties and rights. He or she maintained his language, name, culture, and identity. He or she was treated as a member of the community or the family he or she found himself within. He or she was not a slave for life. His children were not slaves.
Okay.
He could become an important person with the society he or she found himself in. So that is the system we had with the domestic servitude. The Europeans introduced something different.
Right.
So perhaps Africans thought that they had the same meaning. And also, nobody traveled back from North America, South America, to tell the Africans what our people were enduring. Because if Africans had known the true meaning of the transatlantic slave trade, then this would not have escalated
As
to
far
this
as
level. Yes. So this was a slave market here. We sold the captives to the Europeans, and unfortunately, human beings were exchanged for European goods like guns, gunpowder, things that escalated tribal wars and ethnic warfare.
So what the Europeans were doing was they was bringing these raw materials here to the Africans and saying, here, you take this and give me a life, give me a human, give me a body.
Yes. So after they were sold in this room, they were branded at the courtyard. So when I say branding, I mean the companies had their names and their metal. You put that metal into fire, so the whole thing was red hot. So out of these three places, one area was stamped, your hand, your chest, or your back. So the brand name on your skin identified the slave owner. It also determined where you were going from here, either to the Caribbean, the West Indies, or North America. So after they were branded, we kept them in the dungeons to await the ships.
Your branding determined who brought you, who purchased you.
It's basically like a company constructed this building to transact its business
Right.
with slaves.
Right.
So Company A was shipping his captives to North America, Company B to the Caribbean, Company C to the West Indies.
And there is where they're waited, and then once they arrived there, then they just dispersed them to the highest bidder.
Yes,
in
they
those
were
areas.
auctioned, yes. So that is the history behind. So it had the name Palaver because there was a lot of noise here. Bargaining in business, yes, was going on.
So kind of like bargaining cattle or picking up a hog or a cow and then just shipping it to wherever you want to ship it to and waiting to see who the highest bidder is going to be to purchase it. So now we are headed to the governor's residence.
Yes, the governor's residence.
Okay.
So this castle performed several duties over the years. Initially, this was built as a trading post for mainly captive slaves and gold. And when the English abolished the slave trade, they did not leave. They stayed. So I normally say in Africa, colonization and European imperialism compensated the transatlantic slave trade because they stayed, they ruled, and still controlled Africa's natural resources. So you could imagine the tons of gold, ivory, uranium, and other minerals that were stolen from Africa to develop the West. So when colonization started in this country officially on 6th March 1844, Cape Coast Castle now served as the seat of government for the British. Cape Coast served as Ghana's first capital city. But on 19th March 1877, the British removed the capital from Cape Coast to Accra. So I'm going to show you the governor's apartment, his bedroom and sitting room, when this building was the seat of government for the English political.
Okay. So not only did they rob the country of its people, its individuals, but it also robbed the country of its natural resources.
show you something interesting also before we move on to the governor's base. So up on the hill, that's Fort William.
Okay.
Fort William was built by the British to protect their interest from anybody who tried to take it. So this was more like their bread.
Right.
Now we have the era where Europeans fought among themselves to have good trading posts. So some of their soldiers were stationed there. They watched around anything unusual. They sent signals to those here, and quickly they armed the castle against any attack. So that was the purpose of Fort William. And when you come down, also you find some churches.
Around Fort Williams?
Yes, around Fort William. So up there to your right, the church with the green roof, that is the Methodist Church. The first Methodist church this country had. Wow. And closer to us, just across the street, the yellow one or the cream one is the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. Beyond it is the Catholic Church. And remember this, the churches had their roots in the castles. So those ones are 19th century churches. They constructed the churches and moved the churches outside. They moved out of the castles. So they are still functioning as churches.
When they moved them into the town, did the people, then the locals go there and worship?
Yes.
The Africans?
Yes. So now they realized that there was a need for the Africans to be converted to
their religion. So here we have arrived at the governor's bedroom and hall, and this is the chambers where the governor resided during his time here in Cape Coast at the castle.
That's all, yes. So let's go. Governor's sitting room. Look at the sizes of the windows.
They're huge.
Yes. So you see there's this contrast between the governor's apartment and the dungeon. So this was a governor's sitting room or living room. Let me show you the bedroom also.
This is a lot smaller.
A bit smaller, yes. So this was the governor's bedroom. He actually stayed at the highest point.
Oh, this is the highest point of the castle?
Exactly. So we realized that, or we learned that showed that he was the highest, entered the English crown.
Right.
So he was more like the highest person within this structure. But as I mentioned, on 19th March 1877, the British removed the capital from Cape Coast to Accra. So Accra is currently Ghana's capital city. And on 6th March 1957, we had independence from the British. And interestingly, Ghana is the first black country in Africa to gain its independence from a colonial power.
Well, there you have it. Come to Ghana, yeah.
This place was a barrier ground for Europeans only. When the Africans died in the dungeons or at the condemned cells, their remains were thrown into the sea. Interestingly, this is the only Ghanaian or the only African the Europeans buried among them. The name is Philip Kwaku. He was a native of this town. He was born around 1741. At the age 11, Philip Kwaku had a scholarship to England where he was trained and educated. He was ordained as a priest in London around 1765. Became the first African to be ordained as an Anglican priest. He returned as a teacher, a missionary, and a reverend minister. So up there was the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. The Anglican Church is sitting right on top of the male dungeons. And we had a situation where an African reverend minister led an all-European congregation, whilst his fellow Africans were right underneath him in chains and in shackles. He didn't say anything for the slave trade. He didn't say anything against it from the records that we've had. He died 1816 at the age 75 years old. So the British buried Philip Kwaku right here. So I say he's a victim of the system because, the Europeans wanted to further the agenda of slavery and colonization.
So they kind of brainwashed him?
Exactly. So they also used their religion to, change the mindset of the people here. And, where they propagated that, God and Jesus was in the skin of a white person.
Right. So because they raised him up since he was 11 into their faith, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because now, if somebody comes to you here and this person is trying to propagate his or her religion to you and tells you that his God and Jesus is in his skin. So it brings out that inferiority complex, right? So now you see that the European is almighty than you.
Yes.
So as a result of this, I'll give you an empirical evidence. The local people here developed a certain oral tradition or oral history as a result of what they were fed with during the days of slavery and colonization. I'll say it in Fanti, then after I'll translate it to English. What is a kwasor? Na nam kondro kwasor na ishia broni wa konda men kwasor bio san what you could feel. So this is what the local said. If you are going to church and on your way to church you see a white man or a white woman, there is no need for you to go to church again. Go home. You've seen your God.
Wow.
So that is the oral history the locals developed as a result of what they were fed with.
Right.
So they needed somebody to further that agenda. So I'll pick one of you, send that person to Europe, train and educate so that this person can tell you
All about the
my legacy.
gospel.
Exactly. So that is what happened to Philip Cook. And you also realize that when the Europeans came here initially, they took some Africans to Europe. They didn't send them there to be trained to become lawyers, doctors, or teachers or engineers. They were sent there to become priests,
Right.
to further the cause of
The
slavery.
agenda.
Yes, exactly.
Because initially, yeah, I was saying that he was a traitor off camera. I didn't want to say it on the camera, but I felt like he was a traitor. Okay, so he was just correcting me, like, no, but it's a reason why. So thank you for that.
Yes, you're welcome, my sister. We had this plaque in 1992 when Ghana first celebrated Pan-African Historical Festival. In short, we call it PANAFest. And this one is on behalf of every Ghanaian to serve as a reminder of the pain and agony our ancestors endured. And we make sure that nobody falls victim to that again. Let us protect ourselves from it and let us stay united as Black people. It reads, in everlasting memory of the anguish of our ancestors, may those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their root. May humanity never again perpetrate such injustice against humanity. We, the living, vow to uphold this. So this should also be a lesson to mankind or humanity that nobody should ever go through that barbaric conditions again. And also, as human as we are, let us endeavor to treat each one better. If we are capable and able of treating each other better, then I guess the world will rather become a better place for all of us to live in, regardless of race, color, gender, nationality, or religion. So that is a simple message.
Very well said. So that concludes this tour here at Cape Coast, and I just want to thank you for
You're welcome.
doing this tour. And I did not expect to become so emotional, but it was very powerful. You did an amazing job giving this tour, and I just appreciate your time.
You're welcome, my sister.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay, guys, y'all have just tuned in to Just Vlog, so stay tuned until the next video.